America is drowning in debt, but no one is panicking. That should worry you, because every dollar of debt belongs to someone, and there's a good chance that someone is you. If America is trillions of dollars in debt, there's one simple question nobody can avoid. Who is getting rich? Because let's be honest, when you hear that the United States owes over $34 trillion, it sounds insane. That's not just a big number. That's a number so large most people can't even picture it. And yet, life goes on. The government still functions. The military still runs. Social security checks still go out. The economy doesn't just shut down. So where did all that borrowed money go? Most people think they already know the answer. They'll say China, or maybe foreign countries. Some even believe there's a secret group or a single powerful nation controlling everything. But here's the thing, that explanation feels too easy. Because if America really owed all that money to someone else, someone would have already come to collect, and that hasn't happened. So instead of repeating the same headlines, let's slow down and think logically. Debt doesn't disappear. Every dollar borrowed ends up in someone's pocket. Someone owns that debt. Someone is holding the receipt. The real question isn't how big the debt is. The real question is, who is holding it? And once you start digging into that answer, you realize something uncomfortable. The biggest creditor to the United States isn't some foreign enemy. It isn't a shadow organization. It isn't even China. It's much closer to home. And understanding that one fact changes how you see taxes, inflation, retirement, and even your own savings. Because this story isn't about governments. It's about people. And that's where things get interesting. Here's the part most people never hear. The United States doesn't owe most of its debt to foreign countries. It owes it to itself. That sounds strange at first, but stay with me. A huge chunk of US government debt is owned by things Americans already trust. Retirement funds, pension plans, banks, and investment funds. Think about your 401k, or your parents' pension, or a retirement account tied to your job. Those accounts don't just sit on cash. They invest it. And one of the safest investments in the world is US government bonds. So when you put money into a retirement fund, that fund often turns around and lends it to the government by buying Treasury bonds. In other words, you're not just a worker or a taxpayer, you're also a lender. The government borrows money from its own people. Social Security works the same way. The money workers pay in doesn't just sit in a vault. It gets invested in US Treasury bonds. So the government owes money to the Social Security Trust Fund. And that trust fund exists to pay future retirees, people like your parents, or eventually, you. This is where the story changes. America's debt isn't just some abstract number. It's tied directly to retirement checks, pension payments, and long-term savings. That's why the system hasn't collapsed. Because defaulting on that debt wouldn't hurt some distant country. It would hurt Americans first. Your savings, your retirement, your future. And that's something no government can ignore for long. Now let's talk about the part everyone brings up: China. Anytime US debt comes up, someone says, well, yeah, but China owns us. That sounds scary. It also sounds simple. And that's why it spreads so fast. But here's the truth most headlines skip. China doesn't own America. China is just one of many investors. Yes, China does hold US government debt, but it's a much smaller slice than people think. Less than 10%. Countries like Japan, the UK, and even private investors hold comparable amounts. And American institutions still hold the largest share overall. China buys US bonds for the same reason everyone else does, because they're considered safe. It's not control, it's an investment. And here's the part that flips the whole narrative. If China suddenly tried to dump all of its US debt, it wouldn't hurt America first. It would hurt China. Bond prices would drop. China would lose value on the bonds it already owns. And global markets would panic, including China's own economy. So this idea that China has America on a leash, that's not how it works. It's more like two massive economies tied together in the same system. If one pulls too hard, both feel it. China doesn't hold US debt as a weapon. It holds it because the global financial system is built around the US dollar. And that makes the relationship a lot more complicated than fear-based headlines suggest. So here's the question that usually comes next. If America is borrowing this much money and printing so much of it, why hasn't everything fallen apart? Why doesn't the US just collapse like other countries that printed too much money? The short answer is trust and the US dollar. The dollar isn't just America's currency, it's the world's currency. Global trade, oil markets, international loans, most of it runs through dollars. That means when the US issues debt, there's always demand. Banks want it, funds want it, other countries want it. US government bonds are still seen as one of the safest places to park money, not because America is perfect, but because the system is built around it. This gives the US a kind of breathing room most countries don't have. It can borrow more, it can print more, and it can push problems further into the future. But here's the part people misunderstand. Printing money doesn't make problems disappear. It just spreads them out. Inflation is the quiet cost. Prices creep up, savings lose purchasing power. Paychecks don't stretch as far as they used to. So while the system holds, someone is still paying. It's just not always obvious who. The dollar's global power buys time, not immunity. And history shows that even trusted systems eventually feel the weight of their choices. So after all of this, there's only one question left. If America owes money, and America also owns a lot of that debt, then who actually pays the price? The answer isn't some foreign country. It isn't China. And it isn't a shadow group behind the scenes. It's regular people. Debt doesn't vanish. It gets pushed forward. Sometimes it shows up as higher taxes. Sometimes it shows up as inflation. And sometimes it shows up quietly over time, in the form of fewer opportunities and higher living costs. You feel it when groceries cost more, when rent keeps rising, when saving money feels harder than it used to. No one sends you a bill labeled national debt, but you pay it anyway. The system survives by shifting the weight, from one year to the next, from one generation to the next. That's why this conversation matters. Because the debt isn't just about numbers on a screen. It's about choices, and who those choices affect. America doesn't owe its debt to China. It owes it to the future. And the real question isn't whether the debt will be paid. It's who ends up carrying it.